Hello, it's Thursday, March 12th, and that means I'll be hosting a hangout for all paid subscribers tonight at 8 p.m. I hope you will join us. If you're not a paid subscriber, you should join just to be at the hangouts. It's worth $5, I think. Always a great time. Hope to see you tonight at 8 East, patreon.com/Pete Dominic to get more information on it. It is also my mom's 80th birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. Very excited to see you and celebrate with you. I'll be doing the hangout from Mom and Dad's, and maybe we'll get a special appearance from the birthday girl who is doing great 2 months after a horrific car accident that had her in the ICU with 15 broken ribs for a week in the ICU, and then another 2 weeks in the hospital. It was it almost 3 weeks, I believe. It was rough. It was a real hard time for the family, but Mom has made an amazing recovery, and so many listeners and friends of mine from this show have reached out, and very, very grateful. I mean, that's what I've learned. Gratitude each and every day is what gets me through the day, no matter how hard things get, and they get very challenging, very difficult for each one of us. Lots of suffering all the time. That's life. So in those moments, in these moments that we are dealing with right now, it's my North Star, the gratitude. Writing in a gratitude journal, just thinking about and being grateful for all of the amazing things that I have in my life right now, including this breath and this time with you. And our hangouts. I get very excited to be at the hangouts, to host them, to hear from people, to get folks' perspective, to connect, to laugh, to share. It's always such a wonderful time, and often we are there for almost 3 hours because nobody wants to leave. There's 50, 60, 70 people that join us on Thursday nights. Please stop by tonight at 8 p.m. because I'm very grateful for those gatherings as well. So that is the opening spiritual message. I don't know where I was going, but just thinking about my mom and how lucky I feel that she's made such an amazing recovery, and how lucky I feel to have so many of you in my life. And looking forward to seeing so many of you in real life in Las Vegas, April 9th through 12th. Pod Jam 3 is on. I hope to see you there. Get your tickets now. Okay, well, I've got a great guest joining me today. Amy Littlefield is here, and she is the abortion access correspondent at The Nation magazine. She's also a freelance investigative reporter who focuses on the intersection of religion and healthcare. And she's the author of a brand new book out yesterday called Killers of Roe, a whodunit that investigates the death of abortion rights. And we had a great conversation. I think you're going to really like it, outside the fact that I used that wireless mic for my conversation with Amy and my conversation with Maria the day before. I taped them both that day. And so other than that, and people sent me some really funny emails and responses. I'll share them with you either at the hangout tonight or later on. But it's a great conversation with Amy. I think you're going to like it a lot. I learned a lot, and it's an important issue to cover, a book that's just out, and you can jump to it if you want to. Right now, it starts at 42 minutes. But first, it's time for your headlines and your clip show. Got a whole bunch of really important sound bites coming up, and your headlines starting there. Keeping in mind and remembering that these are the aberrations to the world. These are the bad news stories. There's all kinds of amazing things happening all the time, even in this world filled with chaos. Look around and find the helpers, the love, the kindness. It's there. And if you can't find it, spread some yourself. That's my opening positivity message today as I head into the headlines. I like to bookend it with positivity, comedy at the end coming up. But first, got to tell you about the latest in the, so far, I believe it's 12 days of Trump's war, which is what it should be called, Trump's war. Oil prices jump. 2 tankers are burning off of Iraq's coast after attacks. Iran claimed it had struck one of 2 oil tankers that were burning off the Iraqi coast. Iraqi closed oil terminals amid growing disruption to global supplies, reports the New York Times. Pentagon officials told lawmakers in a closed-door briefing that the estimated cost of the war exceeded $11.3 billion in its first week. So it's about $1 billion a day, and that could change at any point, but that's insane. It's unfathomable and a complete and total waste. Some Trump administration officials apparently growing pessimistic about the lack of a strategy to finish the war, but they're not telling Trump. according to the New York Times. The Pentagon has barred news photographers from Iran war briefings because they don't like some of the pictures that they're taking of our cosplay Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. In its first briefing after the U.S. attacked Iran, the Pentagon welcomed photographers from many news outlets, including Bloomberg, the Associated Press, Getty Images, Reuters, and more. But the Pentagon has since enacted strict limits that bar access to photographers from news organizations, which is just the latest move from the Department of Defense propaganda arm to restrict press access. Pentagon said in a statement, it made the change for photographers to use the space in the Pentagon's briefing room effectively. Whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. They don't like the pictures, apparently, is the reporting. Somebody didn't like a picture of stupid Pete Hegseth, and that's what this is about. His vanity and him wanting to project this kind of caricature of an action star, one that can't do full pull-ups and thinks he's starting a holy war. Other stories related to the war, and probably the most important one, is that the U.S. was, in fact, responsible for the missile strike on an Iranian elementary school. According to preliminary findings in a government military investigation, they're blaming outdated targeting information. But that is no excuse because there were playfields painted on the ground. I mean, this is a horrible, horrible story. I think about those girls and that horrific missile strike every day, and we're going to pay a cost for that. I can't imagine that we aren't, but the way the world is seeing us, or certainly our administration and anybody who supports them, is probably pretty accurate and pretty horrible. Iran's counterattacks have apparently slowed down, according to the New York Times analysis. Either its arsenal is depleted or it's holding weapons in reserve. Experts are saying at least 7 people died in Israeli strikes on Beirut this morning. Lebanese officials say Israel's bombing campaign against Hezbollah has killed more than 600 people in Lebanon, driven 800,000 from their homes. Wow, this war of choice from this psycho and how it's affected almost everyone, or it will. Oil tankers continue to be targeted. Mentioned that one. Iran has fired indiscriminate cluster munition warheads at Israelis several times during this war, apparently. More than 100 countries signed a pact to ban those weapons. Iran is using them because they, Israel, and the U.S. didn't sign it. The 3 big players in this war didn't sign it. So now we all get to see what we've sown. The war has rerouted flights around the Middle East, which is a crazy graphic if you look at it. In politics, here at home, quid pro quo went on a multi-state tour, set out on it yesterday, designed to show voters that he's focused on the economy and their pocketbooks and that he still controls the Republican Party. At least that's the message. But it's not going great. I would say this multi-state tour is not going too well. Yesterday, some lady fainted behind him, but Dr. Oz saved her. Was that in Kentucky? He's, by the way, yet to endorse either John Cornyn or Ken Paxton in the Texas Senate contest. He's apparently using that as leverage for a bill that would impose strict voter ID requirements. You've heard about it, the SAVE Act. It ain't passing. I don't think it's going anywhere in the Senate. So this is just another stalemate that he's destroying his own party with. But good, fine. Oh, there's news on tariffs. The administration said more than 4.4 million hours might be needed to manually process refunds requested by companies after the Supreme Court struck down many of Trump's tariffs last month. More than 4.4 million hours. That's how long it's going to take to process refunds. Talk about government time wasted. You just shoot yourself in the dick and then have to repair it for 4.4 million hours. The government also announced an investigation into unfair trading practices by 16 of America's largest trading partners as it works to resurrect tariffs. Just wow. Another day, another big story on the Trump-Epstein files. Quote, on the heels of news reports that more than 40,000 files were either withheld or taken down from the Department of Justice's site with documents related to Jeffrey Epstein case, the Department of Justice late last week released documents including FBI memos related to accusations against President Donald Trump. MS Now has found that the released files still appear to be incomplete, missing FBI notes and memos reflecting interviews with women alleging abuse by other prominent men. Also, another story yesterday, an accountant who worked closely with Jeffrey Epstein for more than a decade and serves now as an executor of his estate, told members of Congress that he was, quote, not aware of the nature or extent of Epstein's abuse of so many women until after his death, okay? Well, Richard Kahn was one of Epstein's closest associates in his final years, managing his finances, investments, and other minutiae, such as renovations on his private Caribbean island. Well, he was subpoenaed, and he had to appear before the House Oversight Committee and testify behind closed doors that he did not socialize with Epstein. So first, he tries to free himself of any guilt of that, and we can examine him and his connections and what he knew. But what we learned yesterday, well, there was a lot that we learned out of this testimony, but one of the biggest stories, at least, is that he revealed a settlement with a woman who had also accused Donald Trump. Apparently, Jeffrey Epstein paid a settlement to a woman who accused Trump of sexually abusing her. Did you hear that? Ro Khanna on PBS NewsHour yesterday. I'll see if I can find that clip for you. He said that Richard Kahn, Epstein's accountant, confirmed that the alleged sex trafficker's estate had made a payment to a woman who accused both Epstein and Trump. He did not say how much the settlement was or when it was paid during his deposition in front of the House Oversight Committee yesterday. If it was fake, then why was she paid a settlement? There must be some validity to it, said Ro Khanna. Now, I'm not saying validity necessarily against Donald Trump. Maybe it's against Epstein, but he did confirm there was a settlement payout. So that's a big story as well yesterday. And while I was putting together the news segment, I got one more story sent to me by Kevin Richberg, who I asked to come on and talk about the story he's just read, but he said he's naked and headed to the shower, so couldn't do it. But he said, if you want your head to explode, read the Washington Post's poll of 1,000 people on the war in Iran. It's the highlight of my morning. 8% of the people who say that strikes will contribute to the long-term security of the U.S. fear it may hurt the security of the U.S. through retaliatory strikes. He said the percentage who oppose the war has increased. However, of the people who support the war, they obviously have some kind of bizarre cognitive dissonance because a high percentage clearly support but don't believe there's rationale. And they believe the casualties aren't worth it. So somewhere out there are folks who support continuing the war despite believing there's no justification and the casualties aren't worth it. And then Kevin adds, in addition to my first point, which is fundamentally an oxymoron, that 8% of people need to be sequestered away from the general population for protection of the herd. That is this morning's Naked Person Report by Kevin Richberg. He reads in the nude, so we don't have to. Well, there you go. That's a fun way to wrap up the headlines. Let's get to the clips that I've got for you. Yesterday's sound bites. I like to start and end with comedy clips. Let's start with Colbert last night on the CBS Late Show.
This is now hitting Americans at the gas pump. According to sorry, I misread that. According to AAA. Mistake. Before the war, it's an easy mistake. It's a simple mistake. Before the war, the average price was $2.98 a gallon. Today, it's $3.58. Yeah. That's the wrong direction. Looks like we might have to downgrade some of our summer travel plans. Disney World? No, kids. I said I'd take you to Dizzy World. Now, get on the tire swing. I'm going to whip you around for a while Grandma sings Hakuna Matata. She doesn't know the lyrics. Trump is scrambling to minimize the political damage, posting earlier this week, short-term oil prices, which will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is a very small price to pay for USA and world safety and peace. Easy for him to say. He doesn't pay for his own gas. That's anyone who stands behind him. Somehow. Somehow, President Businessman didn't see all this coming. Reportedly, this weekend's oil price spike caught White House staffers off guard. According to one, it was insane. It absolutely surprised the administration. Really? You were surprised that bombing the place the oil comes from makes the oil cost more? I thought burning down the Ann Taylor loft would lead to more sensible workplace separates. That's what I thought. Trump went to Ohio today to sort of sell his war. And while he was there touring a factory, Fox News' Peter Doocy asked this.
You just said it is a little excursion, and you said it is a war. So which one is it?
Well, it's both. It's both. It's an excursion that will keep us out of a war, and the war is going to be. I mean, for them it's a war. For us, it's turned out to be easier than we thought.
It's a war, but it's an excursion. And it's a shampoo while also being a conditioner. Keeps down the nuclear and the flakes.
All right, start with some laughs. Let's get very serious now with Lawrence O'Donnell last night on MS Now. I don't usually include clips from his or other people's kind of monologues on their shows, but I do watch him and respect him a lot. It's sometimes a little too performative for me, or maybe not. I don't know. I know him. I've met him. He's always been very cool to me, but he's a serious dude, and I think his delivery, I don't know, kind of works for me. But in this clip, it's so dramatic and important because, again, it's about those girls that we killed in a missile strike in Iran last week. And yesterday, Trump was asked about it. This is the third day in a row he's been asked about it. Good job by those reporters, although there should have been a follow-up. Nonetheless, it's not going away. Anyway, Lawrence O'Donnell puts it really boldly, plainly, dramatically, and just the way it needs to be said, in my opinion. Get ready, strap in, here it is.
Today, the New York Times reports a visual investigation by the Times showed the building housing the school had been fenced off from the military base between 2013 and 2016. 3 public entrances were open to the school. Ground was cleared, and play areas, including a sports field, were painted on asphalt, and walls were painted blue and pink. So the outdated targeting information that Donald Trump's team of incompetence was using that attacked that school was at least 10 years old. And now 175 people, most of them children, are dead. First, Donald Trump lied, as he always does. He first attempted to blame Iran, saying Iran could somehow obtain and operate an American Tomahawk missile, which is, of course, a complete screaming lie that Donald Trump only tried once. And the next day, Donald Trump said there's an investigation going on, so he wasn't going to talk about it. And then today he reached a new low in Trump lying when he tried to claim he didn't know about the attack. He didn't know about the dead children. He actually said the words, I don't know about it. And so during Donald Trump's lifetime, we have watched the presidency go from the buck stops here to I don't know about it. Please keep Harry Truman in mind and imagine him watching Donald Trump respond today to the question, as Commander-in-Chief, do you take responsibility for that?
A new report says that the military investigation has found that the United States struck the school in Iran. As Commander-in-Chief, do you take responsibility for that?
That is what?
As Commander-in-Chief, do you...
For what?
For the strike on the school in Iran. A new report says the military investigation has found it was the United States that struck the school.
I don't know about it.
I don't know about it. And then he wandered off in search of another question. And of course, the next White House reporter changed the subject for him, as he knew that would happen. And he is lying. Of course he's lying. This time he's lying about the deaths of girls in Iran, brave enough to try to get an education, the girls who could be the future for the kind of Iranian society we would all like to see. Some of those girls might have helped lead Iran into that future. And Donald Trump, once again, disgraces the American presidency, this time by saying, I don't know about it, when he is asked about the death of those girls killed by an American Tomahawk missile. Donald Trump doesn't know about a lot of things. Donald Trump doesn't know most things that he needs to know and should know, but Donald Trump knows. Those girls were killed by one of his Tomahawk missiles. And he knows those girls would be alive today if he did not decide to start his war in Iran. The war that he called today a little excursion. In a little excursion, girls don't get killed in their classrooms. In a little excursion, soldiers don't face amputation. In a little excursion, soldiers don't have brain damage. In a little excursion, soldiers are not killed. Donald Trump's war is what killed those girls.
Yes. I couldn't find anybody saying it better than Lawrence O'Donnell, and I'll stay on that story, of course, as well. I think so many people are. It's just so horrifying, and I'm sure there's probably going to be more. It's going to probably get a lot worse, not only there, but potentially here and around the country, as well as always over in the Middle East, which seems part of life there in Israel, Lebanon, so on. Now these Gulf states that were tourist hotspots, so many intertwining butterflies wings effect. And let's go to Bloomberg Television, where they had an energy analyst from, I think, this organization, the Carlyle Energy Group. Anyway, his name is Jeff Curry. I thought he made some really important points, and I wanted to share it.
I believe that even if there's a ceasefire tomorrow, right now, the next 5 minutes, the world's changed. The commodities of the crude. What's changed?
For one, you've disrupted global supply chains. This is not just a disruption oil. It's gas, it's fertilizers, it's metals, it's petrochemicals. The list goes on. And then you've disrupted supply chains in countries all over the world. The ships are in the wrong places. The insurances are being canceled. You've taken the pressure out of the fields that you've shut in places like Saudi Arabia or Iraq or even in the UAE. The list goes on and on. The damage is going to take months to unwind. But I want to bring it to the immediate. There is no policy response that can stop this ascent in crude. None. And yes, you've paid this 400 million barrel headline. Flow rate is what matters. You know, the maximum sustainable flow rate is 2 million barrels per day. So 400, that'll take them 200 days to get that out. And you put that in the context of a disruption of, let's net it out of this, it's got to be somewhere around 18 million barrels per day right now. You're just minuscule in terms of offsetting it. So again, there's not many options here.
Gulp. Zoinks. I don't want to go in there, Shaggy. Oh, man. Very interesting analysis if you followed it. I think I did. Here's a little lower brow analysis from Joe Rogan.
It just seems so insane based on what he ran on. I mean, this is why a lot of people feel betrayed, right? He ran on no more wars and these stupid, senseless wars, and then we have one that we can't even really clearly define why we did it.
Someone should do a search for, there's the Daily Show and other big shows have hardware and software that does this, where you can find like a certain person saying a certain word or phrase. And I wonder how many times Joe Rogan and the like have said, "We feel betrayed." That's a pretty strong statement to say about someone that you helped elect and supported at any level. If it's the mayor and he betrayed you, usually you would only say it once. And I'm saying someone should do a search to see how many times Rogan has said he's betrayed his supporters, he's betrayed us, he's betrayed me. I don't know. That would be interesting. How many betrayals can you take, Joe, before you start questioning everything that you've been responsible for and support, and issue your own very full-throated apology? Never going to happen. All right. Here is Jeffrey Goldberg. He's the editor-in-chief over at The Atlantic, and he's talking about this shit show from the Pentagon and Hegseth. Of course, he's the reporter who accidentally got added to that Signal chat, and I think he was asked about that and put it all in context.
Struck by in this current Iran war as it relates back to the Signal moment and the Signal discussion is that Hegseth maintains the same posture, kind of, to put it in the vernacular, this kind of blowhard, performatively macho, showing off kind of. He's behaving as if he's the movie version of Patton, not even the real world version of Patton, but the movie version of Patton. But it's just like, this is not the traditional model of military leadership. The most surprising thing, I guess, in the chat, especially on that Saturday when the main Yemen attack was occurring, to me, and this was literally my reaction watching it come, unfurl on my phone, was whenever Hegseth would say something, I literally thought to myself, I'm just going to say it the way I sort of said it to myself, dude, you don't have to play Secretary of Defense. You are Secretary of Defense. Like, it was almost like he was performing maybe for the vice president or for the other members of the cabinet. Yeah, and it was all this kind of like macho posturing. And it's like, dude, we got it. You're the Secretary of Defense. You're in charge of the most powerful military in the history of the world. So you don't have to, you don't have to perform.
Yeah, well said. Not the most important analysis. I just saw that clip floating around, and I just thought he put it well, and he would know because he's been covering a lot of different secretaries of defense and everything else for a long time. Okay, let's go to Rory Stewart, who is a British commentator and professor who went to school here, I believe. He's a smart guy. I've seen his show several times, and, well, here is his dire, dark analysis.
This Iran engagement will prove to be more significant than any of it. I think this is the moment where all the norms and all the rules are finally exposed. This is the moment where America's power in the world is revealed as being a danger, not just to its traditional enemies, but also to its allies in Western Europe and the Gulf. It's the moment where I think people will start reorganizing the whole world. The world will become more dangerous, more nuclear weapons will take place. Whatever happens with a new US administration, whatever president comes in, you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
No, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. How many of those are there? Just tell me how many more of those there are that describes how you can't fix something that's already been broken. Can't solve it. I didn't like that analysis. It didn't make me feel great. Here is Congressman Jim Himes, who has an interesting theory on how this ends. But then at the end of the clip, I feel like we didn't really get a conclusion. I still like the analysis.
I have a theory on how this ends, and I'm willing to make a small bet on it. The next couple of weeks, you're going to see oil go across 100. In fact, it may happen today, $100 a barrel. That is going to translate into very high prices at the pump for the American consumer. God forbid, but there's some chance we're going to see additional loss of life in our service members in the region. Projections for the economic growth are going to go down because that happens when you can't get oil. And at some point in 3, 4, 5 weeks, the president is going to realize, and he's going to look at the numbers, and he's going to say, this is really not tenable. And he's going to declare victory and walk away. But what will have been achieved is that you will have replaced a very bad supreme leader, killed him, replaced him with his son, who is more radical than he is, and by the way, committed to the creation of a nuclear weapon. You will have a wounded animal of a vicious regime, and if there's one thing more dangerous than an animal, it's a wounded animal. And you will have stirred that, if I can continue to use too many metaphors, you will have kicked that hornet's nest literally adjacent to the arteries that allow for 25% of the world's energy consumption to move.
Yes, there you go. I guess he did kind of say how he thinks it's going to end with Trump saying, declaring a victory. And the conclusion will be that he got rid of an old guy who's going to die soon anyway. He's 86, which is a point that has been made over and over, but probably should be highlighted. He was going to die soon. He was ailing. That's what they say to you when you're 86, I guess. And I don't know. He had health issues, obviously. Who doesn't? And instead, we martyred him. And now look who he was replaced with. An even worse guy. I mean, it's like stepping on a rake over and over and over again. It's so hard to believe and to fathom that one man has so much control. The system was not designed for that. It was designed against that, and yet here we are. One more 3-minute clip that perfectly distills how I feel. by random guy on TikTok. I don't know who this is. Sorry, Sean Nielsen, who gave me rightful criticism for not attributing to a couple of clips I played a week ago. And I think that's very important. But in this case, I don't know who he is, but he captures exactly how I, and I know many of you feel about one very important thing or moment in history, recent history. And so I'll play this very serious clip that will get you emotionally wrought and angry probably along with me, but also illustrate how we're feeling. And then we'll get to a couple laughs and my conversation with Amy Littlefield. And I don't know who put the music behind it. It's very low. And yeah, he gets a little repetitive, but at the end, I don't know. I feel like stay till the end of this clip. Hopefully you trust me on it. But here he is. Guy who speaks for a lot of us.
When this is all over, and I think it's going to be over sooner than a lot of people think. At least I certainly hope it is. And I think it will be. But regardless, whenever it ends, and however it ends, when we look back at this point in our history and everything we've been through, even many years from now, as we look back, there are things that I will never get over. That I will never be able to forgive. And one of those things that I don't think I will ever get over, is January 6th. And not just that day, but everything that led up to that day, the intent of that day, the criminal conspiracy that culminated in the events of that day. That insurrection was a tactic. It was part of the strategy in the criminal conspiracy to overturn the results of the election and keep Donald Trump in power illegally. And I will never get over that. And I will never be able to forgive people. See, the thing is, I am more angry about it today than I was on January 6th. And I think the reason is because of the people who voted for him after that happened. That I will never get my mind around that. And I will never be able to forgive anyone who voted for him in 2024 after January 6th, after everything that he did to literally try to overthrow the republic. He gets rewarded for it. He gets elected again. I will never. I will never get over that. And I will never be able to forgive anyone who either voted for that, and even those people who couldn't even be bothered to vote at all. That's what so infuriates me. That's why I'm even more angry about it now than I was on January 6th and the days and weeks thereafter. We thought at that time that there's no way he comes back from this. At least many of us did. Again, I guess that was one of those times where I gave the American people more credit than they were deserving. I figured there's no way. The guy literally incited a violent insurrection on live fucking television. And everything that came out afterwards about the criminal conspiracy behind it. But you know what? Most Americans have no idea. They don't actually know everything that Donald Trump did in his attempt to overthrow the republic and stay in power illegally. And many of them just have memory hold the whole damn thing. Or thought, well, you know what? All he did was give a speech. He didn't mean it to turn into a violent riot, because they have no idea. They have no idea what actually happened. Anyway, and and all the other things that should have happened that didn't. I mean, the man should be in prison right now. He should have been convicted in that second impeachment trial.
Yes, that's why I wanted you to stay to the end. He reminds us that he should have been convicted in that second impeachment trial. So many of us feel this way. That is the narrative I feel for so many of us. This is why I wanted to capture guy who speaks for all of us. There you go. Now let's head back to the comedy clips, starting with, I just got two here. It's Jimmy Kimmel on ABC last night.
Meanwhile, our founding frauder is still trying to prove he won the election he lost 6 years ago. The FBI seized records related to a comprehensive election audit in Phoenix that was ordered by their Republican state Senate in 2021, which concluded that not only wasn't the election tilted in favor of Joe Biden, when they counted it all back up, Biden got 99 more votes than he was originally reported, and Trump had 261 fewer votes. But that doesn't stop the bigliest loser. Trump keeps screaming about 2020. Here's how long ago that election was. In 2020, Kim and Kanye were still married. We hadn't even heard the words squid and game together yet. The number one song was WAP, and Will Smith was still everyone's favorite non-slappy movie star, all right? They have already investigated this. Remember the cyber ninjas? They found no evidence of fraud. They were testing ballots for traces of bamboo to prove the Chinese had meddled with the election, which is like looking for prints of wooden shoes to prove the Dutch have been sleeping with your wife. They found nothing. And, of course, this is all to convince their people to support what Trump is calling the Save America Act. This is his attempt to fix the midterm election and save his own ass. I brought this up during the monologue the other night, and I guess this didn't sit too well with one of the Schmidt heads on Newsmax who would like to report me to the authorities.
Next up, Jimmy Kimmel on the SAVE Act, aligning our country with every other first world secure election process, and also something that about 80% of Americans actually want. And Kimmel's up there talking about it like that on a comedy show on a federally regulated network. Again, ABC is defiant. They are against what the FCC is supposed to regulate. ABC breaks that law every single night, and it's about time that they learned a lesson for that. That is not a comedy show. That is propaganda.
I think of it as a little of both, you know? Oh, they're such tattletales. Such little Karen. They're so worried about cancel culture until I come on, and then they're like, call the FCC. He's breaking the law. How does this not embarrass them? This channel, he's on Newsmax. I don't know if you see, they're literally on a payment plan right now. They owe $67 million for spreading Trump's election lies. They paid $20 million 2 months ago for their lies. They have to pay another $20 million in January of next year. But we're propaganda. Newsmax is to the Trump administration what the Fearless Flyer is to Trader Joe's, all right? Can you tell I've had enough of this?
Yes. Good stuff, Kimmel. Let's head over to Late Night with Seth Meyers.
When asked if military operations in Iran are very complete or just beginning, President Trump said, quote, I think you could say both. No, it really can't be both. You can't say both about anything in this country. Remember when we almost had a civil war over this dress? While speaking on Monday to House Republicans, President Trump gave an update on U.S. military operations in Iran and said, quote, we've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. That's not how winning works. Either you won or you didn't. I don't know about Iran, but I think Merriam-Webster is ready to surrender. According to a new report, President Trump has been gifting administration officials pairs of $145 Florsheim dress shoes, and apparently without asking anybody their sizes. Look at that. It's like the last 5 minutes of the movie Big. What was Trump thinking? They don't fit now, but wait until your ankles blow up like mine. Ankle air, it comes for all of us. President Trump today traveled to Ohio and Kentucky as part of his affordability tour. And if you're wondering how that affordability is going, he had to walk. These Florsheims are killing me. Taco Bell this week unveiled more than 20 new menu items. 20? Are you crazy? You can't throw 20 new items at people who are too stoned to make mac and cheese in their dorm? I can't do it, man. There's too many buttons on this thing. Let's go to Taco Bell where there are fewer options. The restaurant chain Buffalo Wild Wings this week unveiled its new wing-flavored espresso protini, which is made with a scoop of muscle milk protein powder. Great for people who've always wanted to drink a podcast. I mean, based on the way the audience reacted, I think they're onto something. Oh. A pod of dolphins was spotted yesterday in New York's East River. So remember, Mafia, that guy you dumped in the East River sleeps with the mammals. Amid complaints that passengers could not see through the windows, New Jersey Transit announced this week that it has replaced them in more than half of its multi-level rail cars. Yeah, God forbid you miss that famous Jersey scenery. Wow, Mama, look, their Pizza Hut's also a KFC. Today was World Plumbing Day, which I'm guessing has something to do with that espresso protini. Yeah, well, I don't know if we can make it today. We're getting slammed. And finally, the New York Giants this week signed a 3-year, $12.3 million deal with a new punter, which is expensive for a punter, but it's the Giants, so he'll play a lot.
Yes, indeed. Tough crowd in New York where he tapes, but very funny. Seth Meyers. All right. Well, now it's time to get to today's guest. Yes, I apologize for the audio on my mic here. I asked for your opinion on it, and many of you definitely messaged me that you did not like it, and I really appreciate all of the very funny comments. Mark Nolte said, that mic makes you sound like Stephen Colbert. All right, I guess I'll take it, Mark. Nick Martino, slightly noticeable sound difference with a new mic. Sounds like you're farther away from it. Kevin Richburg says, the new microphone is indistinguishable from listening to someone on a very good microphone in a giant auditorium. Sounds crystal clear, but sounds like you're broadcasting from a giant cavern. Maybe just give it a cool nickname. Cave mic. Underground sound microphone that puts Baby Pete in the corner. Thank you, Kevin. Steve Replagel says, I thought I was listening to Colbert at first. Check the bottom of the mic and move the switch over to Barack Obama setting for tomorrow's show. Why do I sound like Colbert? And finally, Carrie Williams says, your wireless mic stinks. Sincerely, Carrie. Thank you to all of the feedback. Well, I've got it again today, unfortunately, and then never again. I apologize. It was just an experiment. But Amy Littlefield is my guest. Very excited to have her joining me. I hope that you will go check out her new book. It's called Killers of Roe, My Investigation into the Mysterious Death of Abortion Rights. Our friend Catherine Stewart, who's been on the show, said, in an electrifying book that reads like a real-life whodunit, Amy Littlefield exposes the secret history of the demise of Roe v. Wade and tracks its deadly impact. Her nuanced, portrait-driven study of the assault on women's reproductive rights and health shows that the end of Roe is just the beginning, unless we act collectively to stop it. Amy is the abortion access correspondent of The Nation, freelance investigative reporter who focuses on the intersection of religion and healthcare. The new book is out. Let's do it with Amy Littlefield. Such a great book and way that you did it. Welcome back and congratulations on release day.
Thank you so much, Pete. It's great to be back with you.
Yes, it's it's interesting because when you work for as long as I'm sure you did and as hard as you did on that book, and then release day comes, you're hoping that your work gets attention, especially when it's on an issue that affects so many people and is as important as reproductive rights and the history of abortion. But you've got 1,000 huge stories unfolding, including a war. So I think it's really important that we don't, that's what the good thing about independent media is, that we don't have to worry as much about ratings and we can talk about what's most important. And this is obviously a very important issue, a life and death issue, a reproductive rights issue. How do you talk about, just does it get started on the book and on the issue, which you've covered for years now? How do you compete for people's attention so that they can learn about this issue and this story? I learned so much in researching and reading your book about the history of reproductive rights, and I thought I knew a lot. How do you position this issue right now with all that's going on?
Thank you for asking that, and thank you for covering this issue and for having me on today, because yes, independent media is essential, and thank you for being in the minority of media makers out there who understand that this issue doesn't go away. The number of abortions is up since Roe v. Wade was overturned, which I know we'll talk about how that happened and the surprise there. But that means that, more people than ever, it's an issue in their lives, right? And it means that, already we know that about 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4 women in her lifetime is going to have an abortion. And so I'm not sure when people see this as a niche issue or something that's unimportant because there's not an election going on right now where it's an issue, I beg to differ. And I also want to point out that in history and around the world, we know that reproductive rights are often the canary in the coal mine for authoritarian societies, right? History tells us as dictators from Franco to Stalin, in countries all around the world today where we're seeing the rise of authoritarian governments that are building strong alliances with religious conservatives, we see that reproductive rights are often the first to go. And that was certainly true in our country, right? In a way, the reversal of Roe v. Wade and the constitutional right to abortion was sort of the warning flare for the wider descent into authoritarianism and war that we're seeing now.
You also learned that the issue of race is, there's so much intersectionality here, obviously, but race, specifically in America, Black and brown women, and how, as they started to lose on the issue of race, the civil rights movement and, the civil rights movement in the 60s and the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act gets passed, there starts to be a shift from those people who were so focused on segregation and everything else to women. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Pete, I can tell you've read the book. How wonderful. There was
so good.
One of the revelations for me in reporting this book, I had always known that the anti-abortion movement came about as part of a backlash to feminism, right? You see, feminist women working outside the home, asserting their rights, gaining the right to abortion, gaining the right to participate in public life, in a manner of different ways. And you also see the civil rights movement, of course, Black Americans asserting themselves, challenging white supremacy in public spaces as well, in schools, in public institutions. And I don't think I understood until I started the reporting for this book to what extent anti-abortion activists were really reacting to both of those things, to the civil rights movement as much as to feminism. And there's a historian, Jennifer Holland, that I cite in the book, who really looked at how basically white conservatives in the 60s and 70s began to construct a civil rights movement for white people, right? That's what the anti-abortion movement became. It was like, this is a civil rights movement that as a white person, you can join without having to think about race, right? Obviously, white people joined the civil rights movement, but those were the ones who were willing to confront white supremacy and white conservatives were not willing to do that. And so they could join this other version that copied the language and rhetoric of the civil rights movement that purported to be defending this innocent, marginalized victim, which was the fetus. And this civil rights movement for fetuses, the most alluring part of it for white conservatives is that they were defending this one issue and they could ignore all the rest of the issues and in fact roll back the very rights that had animated the struggle for civil rights, right? So they were pushing back against the gains of women's rights and civil rights while they were claiming to be, the great civil rights movement of their time. And, so it's not an accident that the civil rights language comes up everywhere in the right to life so-called movement.
If we can't control everything about Black folks, at least we can still control women. Think about suffrage, think about the vote, think about some of the most fundamental rights. That seems to be the story of America.
Sure. And if you can control Black women, best of all, right? If you can control, the ultimate would be going after, low-income women of color. And that, sure enough, is what the anti-abortion movement did first.
So you write Killers of Roe, my investigation into the mysterious death of abortion rights, as kind of a murder mystery, which is really a smart and interesting and certainly entertaining way to read this horrifying story. But you're also a big murder mystery fan, or at least Agatha Christie fan. How did you write this book? And then we'll talk about who you talked to. I mean, I can't believe you sat down with some of the people that you sat down on, and probably would have sat down with others if they hadn't been deaded. But they're dead.
That's true. Yeah. I wish I could have talked to some of these dead guys, but the live ones were pretty interesting.
You almost converted. I think you were almost converted to Catholicism.
I was presented with a lot of compelling arguments, but the Catholic faith is a pretty hard sell to an adult. I think if you don't grow up with it.
Listen, it was a hard sell to me my brother in second grade real smart, my brother, still, always was. I was not nearly as smart. And he came home to my dad after like religious instruction. He's like, this is ridiculous. He's like, he's like, this is ridiculous. I don't even understand how he's an 8-year-old boy saying this. So yeah, hard sell. But anyway, why did you do it in this style, in this genre? Yeah. And then obviously we'll get into some of the people he talked about.
Yeah. So I had covered abortion rights for many years. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, I was a new mom. It was the pandemic. I was sad, anxious, not sleeping. And the only thing that I could read was murder mysteries, which is how I had gotten through my adolescence as well, was by reading murder mysteries, principally.
Is that a huge, by the way, not to take, but isn't that demographic like hugely dominated by women, like that are into that, at least the TV shows and stuff? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I think so.
Weird.
Because I think that we need to escape from reality. And also we need to see a story unfold where the people who do bad things get punished. That's my theory about
that's it. That is interesting because men, let's just genderize it generally this is ridiculous, but for a second, like men need to escape from reality too. And my escape is like stupid action.
Yeah.
Real violent.
That's my husband too, like zombies.
Does he like Reacher, Alan Ritchson?
I don't know. I'll have to recommend it.
Well, you guys would both like that. It's both murder mystery and muscly violence. Not to get off the topic.
We have a 5-month-old, so we do not have a lot of time for television these days, but I'll make sure to recommend that to him. So, I think that what I found soothing about the murder mystery paradigm is like the detective sets it all right in the end. And then the killer confesses. They feel bad about it. And then, not that I'm pro incarceration, I'm not, right? But there's some form of justice, right? And in Agatha Christie, it's not necessarily, it's a draconian form I might not agree with. But you want some sort of justice in the end. And that doesn't happen in real life. That never happened to me in these interviews. I didn't get any like tearful confessional moments in these interviews. But I did find the murder mystery paradigm was really helpful to me in sort of enticing myself to sit down with these people, to do serious, deep listening with them, and to really interrogate their motives, which of course is the key part of a murder mystery. Why did they do what they did? Not just how and who, but why done it. And, let's face it, like, I think people of conscience today are in a pretty rough place. Like, we're watching wars all around the world, Gaza, Iran, and, immigrant neighbors getting picked up off the streets. Like, I think a little bit of escapism and humor, even to tell a serious story, helps.
Yeah, your humor throughout the book is really helpful. I don't know how you were able to construct this book on this issue the way that you did. Everybody should get it. It's out today, and it's so important and a really great read. Killers of Roe. I'm talking to Amy Littlefield. And so the killers are actually killers. I mean, Roe was a Supreme Court decision and a real person, but specifically, they really are killers, as you say, right? I mean, these mostly men, but were responsible for a lot of death, right?
Right. I mean, each section of the book focuses on the death of a woman from anti-abortion policy, on the preventable death of a woman who would be alive if not for anti-abortion policy. And of course, that starts in the 1970s with the Hyde Amendment. The 1980s, I talk about Becky Bell, a 17-year-old who died from a parental consent law. She told her friends she loved her parents too much to ask them for permission when she needed an abortion. And so she died of an infection brought on by an unsafe one. And then I talk about, of course, the women we've been reading about in ProPublica stories, more recently, women like Tierra Walker, women like Portia Gumezi, women whose, children chase after women who look like them on the street yelling, "That's mommy," because their mom is gone, women who will never take their 6-year-old to the beach ever again. These stories are gut-wrenching. And what's so hard about it is that they were preventable, not only when it comes to the policies that led directly to these deaths, the policies that made them afraid to seek medical care or that compromised and delayed their medical care when they did seek it in these states with abortion bans. It was preventable over the past 50 years in the course of the incremental destruction of Roe v. Wade, right? If there had been enough mobilization from Democrats and pro-choice activists to save the most vulnerable in the moment as their rights were being eroded, we wouldn't be where we are today. And so I really look at the people responsible for those deaths on all sides of this issue.
Going to get into it, but just a real quick then and now question just to help me with my ignorance. It's back then when women didn't have abortion rights, they could take risky maneuvers or procedures, or they could find a doctor, or they could go someplace where they did. But it was always a medical procedure, an invasive procedure. And now, obviously, it's been safe for years, that procedure. But the now is you can also just take a pill and terminate your pregnancy. I don't mean to make it sound simple, but I'm trying to create this paradigm of then and now, in that even though they've made the procedure illegal in many states, so many fewer doctors are going to do it. You can be potentially penalized for conducting the procedure as a physician. But we now have an actual drug that you can take that's not invasive, it's not dangerous. And of course, they're trying to outlaw that drug. But isn't the atmosphere, even though they've made abortion illegal in many states in this country, it's not as bad as it was then? Am I wrong about that?
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% correct. So, and the caveat, though, is that before Roe v. Wade, of course, whether you could get a safe abortion depended on your access to wealth. And so women who had money, principally white women, could ask a doctor, they could get a therapeutic abortion approved, often in a hospital, and they could terminate their pregnancy safely. Low-income women, principally women of color, right, had to take their chances with a back alley provider. And many were maimed, many died. You know, hospitals used to have special septic wards set up to deal with people who had uterine infections, which was a really painful, slow, terrible way to die.
Ugh.
And what we see more recently, of course, is that medication abortion, you know, which came on the market more than 25 years ago in the United States, has always been restricted because of political reasons, not because of medical reasons. Now, in the wake of the pandemic and changes made under President Biden, and shield laws passed in blue states that allow doctors here, you know, not far from where I am in New York, to send medication abortion into all 50 states, right? It means that in this moment right now, it's actually easier, more affordable, if you know where to look, for someone in Mississippi to get an abortion than it was before Roe v. Wade was overturned, because they can go online, order pills to their door for free or for cheap, have them sent by a licensed clinician after they fill out a form with their medical information, and take a dose of mifepristone and then later misoprostol in order to end their pregnancies at home. There's other considerations that come into play, like the fact that people are being criminalized for pregnancy outcomes, like the fact that there might be legal risks, like the fact that not everyone has a safe place to go. But we are in this landscape. We did not go back in time, right? We're in a new and different world post-Roe than we were before it.
Wasn't there a story recently? Isn't there a pending lawsuit where a doctor in California prescribed drugs, abortion-ending drugs, mifepristone, whatever, to a woman in Texas, and Texas is trying to extradite that physician from California? Do I have that?
Right. There's a couple different lawsuits that have been filed against providers in blue states, California, New York, Delaware, who have provided medication abortion to states where the state governments are very hostile to abortion rights. You know, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton being a real standout in that respect. So far, these efforts have been unsuccessful. So far, the laws in these blue states have protected the providers, not to say it hasn't disrupted their lives. You know, they can't travel to states like Texas, for example, so they are taking a risk. And we know that this is going to eventually probably end up before the Supreme Court, right? And they'll have to look at the question of how much, you know, these Democratic-led states can subvert these abortion bans. But for now, that's effectively what they're doing, and it's pretty amazing.
Killers of Roe. Let's get into the people you talk to and who the killers are. And the first part is titled The First Death of Rosie Jimenez. And we're going back in the past. Who is the believer?
So the believer is this man named Paul Herring. I probably spent more time with him than anyone else in my book. I was really kind of fascinated by him. He's a devout Catholic, raised in Texas. He becomes an early leader in the anti-abortion movement. He files this kind of long shot lawsuit to try to stop abortions that he finds out are happening at an Air Force base in Texas under a federal policy that allows that. He claims that as a taxpayer, he should be able to stop those abortions. This kind of gives him a name in the anti-abortion movement, so he finds his way in. And in 1974, he's pitching this idea for an abortion funding ban that could be attached as a rider to the appropriations bill, the sort of backdoor maneuver to ban abortion specifically for poor people. He's pitching that idea to the Catholic hierarchy, to Catholic leaders. What's funny is that in that moment, they were like, this won't work, this is crazy, and they shot him down. And then, of course, 2 years later, they're fully behind it, and Henry Hyde, with his name on it, gets it through Congress, and it endures to this day. The Hyde Amendment still shapes the lives of millions of people every year. And so he was the initial, this kind of like classic murder mystery behind the scenes guy hiding in the shadows, his grandfather and former bureaucrat living in Virginia. And when I met with him, his motive was to convert me to Catholicism, while I tried to get him to talk about the Hyde Amendment. So we had some pretty interesting in-depth conversations.
What is he hiding? Is he hiding anything? These guys are always hiding something. They're often like really, I'm an almost all men guy at this point, but like, I don't know. I mean, some of these guys that are overtly trying to oppress women are doing all kinds of things, either harassing women, abusing women, or they're gay and they're in the closet. And that is
a lot of them were. Yeah. We have those characters too in the book for sure. Paul Herring, I didn't find anything like that. The secret that he was hiding that I found most surprising was just the simplicity of his motive. He kept trying to convert me with this pitch that if I converted to Catholicism, I could go to heaven, and that the most important thing is we go to heaven. And I found that motive echoed once I knew to listen for it. I found it echoed by almost every single one of the Killers of Roe that I talked to. And it kind of shocked me because it was like, have you really put us through hell so that you can go to heaven? Like, we're in hell right now so that you can get your ticket in, and you have put women through these hellish experiences so that you can get your ticket in. But I heard it so many times. When I get to St. Peter at the Gate, I think that's going to be on my list of things that help me get in. And it's, Pete, you have a Catholic background here. Help me understand.
I mean, all I'm doing is biting my tongue to A, not interrupt my guest, and B, not make jokes about Catholics, for which I have like a 20-minute chunk in my old stand-up act, because there is so much of living your life for heaven, and the disappointment is going to be, well, there isn't any disappointment because you're just going to die. And then that's a wrap. I'm sorry. And all the horrible things you did to get into heaven will be all for naught. And it's really sad because it obviously, first and foremost, people die, but it just tears apart families to live that way as well. I mean, I know a lot of Catholic people who have put God and the idea of getting to heaven before everything else, their relationship with their spouse, their kids, their work, any other purpose that they have. So in the end, it's pathetic and sad to me. And it's also just very selfish, I feel, in a lot of ways. But I mean, I have more to say. Who is Rosie Jimenez?
So Rosie Jimenez was a Mexican-American woman, 27 years old at the time of her death, mom to a 4-year-old daughter, child of migrant farm workers, trying to work her way out of poverty, going to school to try to be a teacher. She finds out she's pregnant. She needs to end the pregnancy. And she finds out that, unlike with her previous abortions, Texas Medicaid is not going to cover the abortion that she needs. And so she goes to an unsafe provider and midwife who inserts a tube into her cervix. She contracts a catastrophic infection, dies a really painful, horrible death while doctors are badgering her to talk about the abortion. She's pleading to be left alone to die in peace. And her death, she's the first known victim of the Hyde Amendment. And, her death, so there's the first death of Rosie Jimenez resulting directly from this, anti-abortion policy. And then there's the question of why that death wasn't enough. Why one person's death, why this tragic preventable death of this woman was not enough to change this policy that not only endured, but became popular, became bipartisan, became something that, Democrats, centrist Democrats like Joe Biden supported until quite recently. This policy became sort of like the middle ground in abortion politics in America, even though it had been responsible for this woman's death.
Sometimes when I think about the Democrats who supported it, it makes me think about other countries. Anytime I think about abortion and its path in America versus so many other countries in Europe and other places that aren't necessarily influenced by the Catholic Church as much, but even if they are, or any other religion, some of which believe. But I mean, it's a very not uniquely American thing, but it certainly does have its foothold, the anti-abortion movement using religion, specifically Catholics and then later evangelicals, right? Like as the wedge. Is that pretty uniquely started, at least in America, effective here first and then exported to South America and other Catholic places?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of the anti-abortion movement strategies and influence have been exported all around the world, right? Many of the large anti-abortion groups have massive international wings and influence. And yes, this was a hallmark of U.S. politics, right? That fiscal conservatives here, people whose economic policies were pretty unpopular because they were like, rich people shouldn't have to pay for the things that poor people need. I mean, that's popular for rich people. It's not necessarily going to excite the majority of your voters, right? And so in order to bring that project about, you have to undermine democracy, which we're seeing plenty of these days. And you have to find some other issues that are going to bring people into your base. And that's what abortion was, right? It was this issue that Republican strategists saw could be used to bring in Catholics, to bring in social conservatives, to bring in people who are going to be single issue voters. And we're going to help them build the coalition that they needed to bring us all into this right-wing hellhole that we're in today.
I don't have anything good to say about Catholicism, but at least, like the Jesuits and more progressive Catholics have played a huge role in human rights and civil rights in America. And I give them all that credit for it. But it's just, it's weird because there could be a lot of good things about Catholic teaching if they weren't all so overshadowed by the damage that that same institution has done to women. And also, just millions of kids around the world that they sexually abused. But don't get me started there. Talk to me about Henry Hyde. Who is he and what is the Hyde Amendment and what has it wrought?
Yeah. So Henry Hyde, 6'3", bear of a man, charming, jovial. He becomes the front man for this ban on federal funding of abortion that's going to, cut off access for millions of people and make it impossible for women on Medicaid to access in most states. He becomes the front man for a really funny reason, which is that he's charming and popular, and he's this freshman congressman, and even some of the Democrats like him. And he's tall. Like, for some reason, there's this fixation on the fact that he's super tall. Bob Bauman, who is a Republican congressman from Maryland, had attempted to introduce a version of the Hyde Amendment in 1975. He gets shut down. He's short. He's stocky. He's gay and closeted. He's very into procedure and kind of a nerd. And so he's super unpopular for that reason. And so he was the one who tapped Henry Hyde on the shoulder and was like, why don't you introduce this ban? And we'll tack it on to an appropriations bill. We'll kind of sneak it in and put it through as this backdoor. And it's poor women, so it's not going to be a major fight the way that it was with, trying to get a total abortion ban passed. And sure enough, that's what they did. Maybe one of my favorite scoops is that Henry Hyde, in addition to being a creep when it came to policy, was also like a literal creep. So I talked to a woman who said he used to grab women's asses. He had grabbed her butt. Like, she worked in Congress and he had grabbed her butt. And so she had to work very hard to keep her butt away from Henry Hyde during her time in Congress. I talked to Faye Waddleton, who was president of Planned Parenthood from 1978 to 1992. She told me Henry Hyde, when they were on the Phil Donahue show once, had tried to make a pass at her, had suggested they go off to Hawaii together. And so he was kind of consistent, right? Like, he was just a creep, pretty much all the way through.
So weird. All of that's weird. It's also weird that you're body shaming Henry Hyde.
Am I body shaming him by saying he was tall?
I mean, Bob Bauman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But the reason you did that, I think, the reason you talk about their physicality is because the one guy failed because he wasn't nearly as charismatic, likable, and good looking as the guy who comes in and everybody likes him, and he's slick and a smooth operator, and he's able to get what the short, fat, closeted gay guy could.
I do want to clarify, Pete. I do want to clarify. Bob Bauman is the one who pointed out to me the fact that Henry Hyde was tall. Okay. Bob was like, Henry was this charming guy. He was tall. Okay. He pointed that out to me.
I love that. I love all of this. And that's all I want to talk about. But Henry, I mean, you didn't get to talk to Henry Hyde because he's dead. And you did get to talk to Bob Bauman, right? What did you learn from him? And what was his angle? I mean, these are all in our point of view, these men aren't good men, and what they have done is horrible, but they don't think of it that way. We kind of touched on it, but specifically, what does this guy think of himself and his achievements?
Yeah. So he thinks that the Hyde Amendment is his greatest achievement from when he was in Congress. Now, of course, he lost his reelection bid in 1980, shortly after it came to light through an FBI investigation that he was cruising the streets of D.C. in his car with congressional plates, picking up men for sex, one of whom turned out to be a boy, 16 years old. And so he wryly calls it the Bauman scandal, right? Now, I don't think people who are gay should have to end their political careers because of it. Of course not. But this is an important part of his story, and it's an important part of who he was. I think, you know, despite being married and having 4 kids, he was in denial to himself about being gay and was a very sad and lonely person.
Yeah.
And another part of his backstory is that he was adopted. And so he told me that he thought his anti-abortion politics might have come subconsciously, in part from the fact that he saw himself as someone who could have been aborted. And I heard that was another pattern that I heard a lot from the anti-abortion folks I talked to. Yeah, that it's like they have a deep feeling of feeling unwanted themselves and identify with the fetus for that reason and want to defend the fetus from being unwanted and aborted. And so I think he could acknowledge that that was part of his motivation.
I relate because my mom tried to give me up for adoption when I was 15 because she was upset with me.
Wow.
She told me she was going to give me back to my real parents, but she's my real mom. And she turns 80 on Thursday, and I still hold that against her. Love you, Mom. Just kidding. Trying to find some levity here because I can't possibly imagine what that must be like. I do have compassion for people that go through that journey, but still keep it to yourself. You don't have to spread that on an entire gender. That being said, it's been wildly successful. Let's go back to the book, which everybody should buy today. It's out today. Talking to Amy Littlefield of The Nation magazine, who I've talked to before. Such an impressive career, such important journalism and work that you're doing. I'm glad that The Nation funds it. And I'm glad that your publisher, who is Hachette, is it? Decided to publish us and pay you to do this really important journalism. I hope people will go out and buy it because it's so damn important to our story. And right now, I'm moving slow, but get to part 2, the second death of Rosie Jimenez.
Yeah. So this is really about the complicity of Democrats, the complicity of pro-choice activists, the difficult decisions that happened within the abortion rights movement that led to having to turn to issues like the threat of a nationwide abortion ban and leave behind the issue of the Hyde Amendment. And so I dug into memos and fundraising bulletins and all sorts of interesting archival material and did interviews with people who were leading the abortion rights movement in that moment to say, why didn't Rosie Jimenez's death stop this policy right there? And a big part of the reason why, you know, I covered this like meeting that happened where it was early 1981, Ronald Reagan's about to get sworn into office. The Supreme Court has just upheld the Hyde Amendment in court, which, you know, this was the main pro-choice strategy, was try to fight things in court. And it worked, except when it didn't. And in this case, it hadn't. The Hyde Amendment had been upheld. And these pro-choice activists, most of them white, are gathered around, you know, in this meeting room. And they had a frank conversation about whether they could sideline what they called poor women in that moment to focus on the idea of a total abortion ban through an amendment to the Constitution. And they decided that that's what they had to do. And so I think what happened throughout history, frankly, is that the abortion rights movement was out-organized and outmaneuvered. Yeah. And they never had the support from Democrats that the anti-abortion movement had from Republicans. And there were disagreements within the movement about how to handle the fact that they were so seriously outmaneuvered and out-organized. And so I trace that history, you know, as it relates to the Hyde Amendment and then other incremental gains by the anti-abortion movement right through until today.
Is the greatest achievement of that long campaign the courts, particularly the Supreme Court, and getting the justices that are on there now? Is that
that was certainly the last straw, right? That was the last major achievement. They needed that in order to overturn Roe v. Wade and put the final nail in the coffin. But I actually think their greatest strength was in their building grassroots and state-based power, right? Almost every piece of legislation restricting abortion access has come at the state level, including, of course, the Mississippi anti-abortion law that resulted in the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. And so the fact that our state is now carved up so that laws and policies differ so much depending on state lines, that's a triumph of their local and state strategies, where I think they massively outflanked progressives and the pro-choice movement.
I can't possibly do this book justice, the amount of work that you put into the people that you got to talk to in the time that we have, and perhaps we'll do part 2 when I'm done with it and you're done with your initial round of interviews. But just pick 1 or 2 more people that you got to actually that you sat down and talked to as part of the work that you put in to this book. Who else? What other killers did you actually meet in real life?
Well, I'd love to tell you about someone on the pro-choice side, which is Senator Bob Packwood. He was a senator from Oregon, and he was an interesting plot twist because he was a staunch defender of women's rights, supported the Equal Rights Amendment, tried to fight the Hyde Amendment, right? Was one of the most vociferous voices against it, often using feminist language. And a friend of Gloria Steinem, she raised money for him. Women's rights champion, accused of sexual misconduct by almost 50 women, right? So I call him the serial kisser in the book. Like, he had this habit, or he used to just shove his tongue into women's throats or stand on their toes and kiss them. So he was, as creepy as Henry Hyde, and yet he was this women's rights champion. And so I think he was emblematic of sort of the mix of true belief and opportunity and the self-interested motives that ran through, even the staunchest defenders of abortion rights throughout this history, and what a messy history it was, and how abortion was often sort of this political football that was used to advance people's careers, or to, in Packwood's case, gain trust with women and get him close to women who he then accosted.
That's
sorry.
It's pretty common. Being the kind of virtue signaling, and then in the meantime, where is the abortion rights movement right now today as we speak? You continue obviously to cover it. This is an investigative reporting book, but where are we today in the U.S. on reproductive rights?
I think access today is a mess of contradictions, right? You have, on the one hand, women dying preventable deaths because they, have a rare complication from a medication abortion. They go to the hospital is afraid to treat them. And, they die of sepsis, just like women used to do before Roe v. Wade, right? If the hospital won't treat you, then it's just as dangerous. People who are experiencing miscarriages and, go into emergency rooms in Texas and Georgia and wind up, having their care delayed until that kills them. And then on the other hand, you have this astonishing fact that abortions have risen every year since we lost Roe v. Wade. Abortions have gone up. Abortion is more accessible, including in, rural Alabama, including in Texas, than it was before. And that's because of the boldness of shield law providers in blue states who are mailing medication abortion, and also of community support networks, right? I've talked to activists who have stashes of medication abortion in their closet, and they'll just put it in a packet or a dime bag and deliver it to someone down the street, or mail it to someone anywhere around the country. And so I think we're really seeing this clear reality that abortion pills are unstoppable. It's driving the anti-abortion movement crazy. They are promoting all kinds of super undemocratic, draconian laws and policies because they're really flailing to try to stop the unstoppable. And they're not succeeding. Although, abortion bans are certainly damaging, what we've learned in the past few years is that they are really not effective.
So great to talk to you again, Amy. The book is very important, and it's being overshadowed. Important issues like this and books like this being overshadowed by everything else that's happening, but it shouldn't be. This is why we want to give a lot of attention to it, to you, to the work that you're doing all the time at The Nation, and everybody should go buy this book right now, Killers of Roe, My Investigation into the Mysterious Death of Abortion Rights. It's surprisingly funny and obviously riveting. It's such an important issue, and I hope that people will go get it. Congratulations. It's clear how much work you put into this book, all with a little kid. What did you have? Do you have a boy or a girl?
I have a 5-year-old, and then I just had a baby daughter who is 5 months old. Yeah. And she waited until I just finished my book. I stood up from my desk and my water broke, and here she is in the world. And yeah, she's not sleeping that well, so she's not the staunchest feminist yet, but we'll get there.
Congratulations on both your kids. Anything that you learned through your own experience being pregnant? I mean, you must have, working on this issue and then becoming pregnant not once but twice, you must have had your own personal experience, or certainly if you weren't already empathic enough to other women who have had to go through this without the resources and freedoms that you had. Anything that you take away from your own personal pregnancies?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I think nothing has made me more committed to the idea that people should get to choose the circumstances of having a child than becoming a mom myself. I love being a mom. It is honestly the greatest joy of my life. Like I love it as much as the traddiest trad wife out there, right? Like I love being around my kids. Sure. I love cuddling my baby even in the middle of the night. And yet it is so all encompassing. It is so hard on your body, on your mind, on it changes your life in every dimension. And I would never wish it on someone whose heart was not in it. And I'm so grateful I got to do it when it was what I wanted fully with my whole heart, because that is what has made it such a joy.
Such a great way of framing it. I'm really happy to hear you say that. Well, congrats on the book. I don't know how you did that with being a parent of a newborn and a 5-year-old. You've been working on it for a while. Killers of Roe, go buy it, everybody, wherever you get books, and support and follow Amy everywhere. What social media platforms are you on? Blue
Sky, and I'm also on Instagram at Little Amy Field.
Go follow her there, and all of the links to all of Amy's work will be in the show notes for today's episode. Amy, thanks so much for joining me again. We'll talk whenever you want, forever.
Thank you so much, Pete. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate it. We appreciate you. Amy Littlefield, go let her know that you heard her on the show right now at those social media platforms that she's on. Thank you very much for listening today. Happy birthday, Mom. If you're listening all the way to the end, you bumblebees are the greatest. That's who you are. John Carroll writes and performs all the music here, johncarroll.org. And I am going to hopefully see you at tonight's hangout. Get your tickets for Pod Jam, support the show with a paid subscription, and give a rating review at Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening. I hope this voice recording finds you doing okay today. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Be the change you want to see today.
When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think your driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know.